Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your patience. We really appreciate it. We've got a great session lined up and want to make sure the full panel is in room for you. I'll now hand it over to Francisco, our co founder and CEO, who will be moderating today's conversation. So, Francisco,
Awesome.
over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rosanna. Again, it's so wonderful to see so many people here. A huge thank you to Paul and Mario, who are joining us for what I think is probably the most exciting conversation happening about what is the role of AI in procurement, especially in agricultural commodity procurement. How is it changing for large CPGs? How do we think about it? What is it going to mean for all of us over the next couple of years? So we're really excited to come in. I'm happy to just introduce folks quickly, but Paul, I guess, is a true expert in commodity hedging and sourcing. Most recently, he was leading the COE at Whole Foods. Mario, who will join in a few minutes, is leading the digital transformation at Grupo Bimbo in AI and procurement. And so they really come from these really unique backgrounds that I think what is the most interesting time in agricultural and commodity procurement generally, but yes, for retailers and CPGs and a lot. So Paul, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Yep, it's a great pleasure to be here with everyone, and excited to share a long career in commodities and commodity sourcing. And I think that's one of the great things about AI. It compresses everything I know into about four and a half minutes to somebody that doesn't know anything.
Well, we'll see. I think that's one of the things we'll talk about. It's interesting. One of the things that we were talking about before we kicked off the webinar, right, was this idea that across a lot of these kind of procurement teams, the pressure is very real, but often the plan isn't, right. It's not always well thought out, or it's that you have to change the plan as new disruptions come on board. We have a customer who came over. They were a pretty senior leader at Nestle, and then now they're running the procurement arm at a large CPG in the Middle East. And what was interesting is when they came on board, they said, well, there was kind of a gap that exists sometimes between the folks that had been working for him before and some of the new folks. And so sometimes even the plan is dependent on both the technology and the talent that's available. And it reminded me, Paul, of something we talked about, right? I think when you had joined Whole Foods in 2022, there were little or no real commodity-based procurement policies in place. And I'd love to just help us understand how did you start there? What's the first thing you put in place? How did that eventually become an advantage?
I would like to say that when you get into supplier discussions and procurement conversations with your suppliers, and some of them might have been 20-year relationships, nobody wants to talk about cost. The supplier doesn't want to talk about what he's pricing things at. The buyer doesn't want to talk about it, especially if everything's running smooth. And so what commodity-based policies and procurements really start to do is they start to benchmark things against a trusted benchmark that both sides agree to. And there might be 3 or 4 or 5 benchmarks within a product or a sourcing conversation. You might have a packaging and then a raw materials and so forth. And so with the kind of the legacy people on board, as you can kind of bring to them this conversation and trust, and it really starts to go with building their confidence in the information that you're providing to them, the commodity-based or the benchmark-based information. And as they become more confident in their in that information that you're bringing forth to them, so that they can have knowledgeable and meaningful conversations with the supplier, it reduces the tension greatly. And then the new folks, this is what they know, so they just immediately start trusting you. And the AI piece just really kind of compresses that timeline into a very rapid environment.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it is this idea of, can we all come together around a single source of truth, right? So,
Right.
what is the right benchmark? One of the things that's been really interesting for us is, I think there's clear benchmarks for things like soy, right? I mean, the joke is like a bean's a bean. But when you're looking at things like specialty crops, right? Blueberries, tomatoes, onions, etc., how hard is it to find that benchmark?
Um, it is a bit of a, it all depends. USDA has a lot of information, whether it's an actual, CBOT price of soybeans or a mostly number on blueberries delivered to the Chicago market, or chia seeds sourced out of Peru. So one of the quick questions that we always tried to work backwards with the suppliers and our partners was, how are you sourcing your product? Because typically, from my background, we were always taking a raw material product and turning it into a finished good. So the conversation was, how are you sourcing it? How are you pricing it? And then we would try to align that same practice across the supply chain. And
Yeah.
and that typically got the conversation open more, where often suppliers do want to keep their information very tight. But if you explain to them that you're just trying to take the risk out of the system, the price and the volatility risk of cost out of the system, and help protect the margins that we've already previously negotiated on, and then typically that's the beginning of a meaningful conversation, when they understand that you're really not trying to take the margin out of the conversation, you're just trying to take the volatility of the cost of raw materials out. That's usually get a, oh, okay, and then they usually bring in more information.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to your point, right? It's like there are certain, things like benchmarking, you can compress that somewhat, but what are the right places to bring in AI? It seems like at the beginning you need to really build that foundation before being able to layer AI on top of it to be really successful.
I think where AI starts to speed the process up and really save, you could be spending a half a day trying to sort through which benchmark is there and where are they and how do I get to them. And USDA is a great resource, but trying to find the right piece and the needle in the haystack. And that's where AI starts to come together. For like Helios, you've got weather issues and you're tracking different risk areas. And if you can identify where your products are coming from and what geographic regions, and then with an AI product like Helios, you're able to kind of zoom that conversation in, and then realize, okay, how is that regional price being set, and then that begets more of that conversation. So where AI starts to overplay is it just takes hours and maybe days of tracking and researching information. And that's where this, kind of the old legacy, I shouldn't say old, but the legacy employee that might have been at the company for 20 years and knows it in their gut, versus the 25-year-old who's just coming out of university. And it levels that playing field a bit, and it really takes that research time and shortens it up.
Yeah, and this is so interesting, right? I mean, let's talk more about how to do that. One of the things that's so interesting for us about commodities is that we had the privilege of working with Dino Cardelli, who was the global, basically, juice sourcing director for Coca-Cola, right? I mean, the guy was buying $2 billion a year of juice, and he knows, I think, more about juice than anybody in the world, right? He's been doing it for a long time. I mean, it's really just a wealth of knowledge. How do he retired, and as you have new folks come into those different roles, right? What does it look like when AI tries to help kind of close that gap, right? I mean, what did it look like, especially for you at Whole Foods and other places. How do you
Well,
help them
yeah.
narrow that?
So a couple of things. Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, and at the very start of things, way back a long time ago, let's call it 18 months, we started into our first
It's a
round
different
of
world
AI.
back then. I don't think cloud existed. It did, but just not in our day to day.
A first round of internal AI features, and then quickly within 5 or 6 months, that first version was sunset, and a new version was started. And where I see AI really starting to take hold is as you are, whether you're working with a large technology company like Amazon, or you're a very small manufacturer, typically you have a lot of information in silos, and getting that information out of the silo and across the team is where I feel AI has its baby steps, and the next leg of that 2.0 will be interpreting that data, but the first step is unlocking that silo information. So as legacy employees and sourcing partners retire or move on, as you can kind of unlock their silo of information and bring that forth across your sourcing team, it's a game changer. And that's where I feel AI starts to really take place. And there's other products out there. There's edge technology and stuff like that also kind of focus in taking that commodity-based information and helping you bridge those gaps.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I spent before Helios, I spent a long time at BCG doing digital transformations. And I remember one of the biggest obstacles was you come into a new client and they'd say, well, we've got data all over the place and doesn't talk to each other. It's not well structured. And so much of the work initially was just trying to standardize the data and getting it to ingestible formats and all that. And what's cool, exactly to your point about AI, is you don't need to do that work at all anymore, where you just dump it into the right, whatever you're using, Gemini or OpenAI or Anthropic. And then it's able to actually, find the information it needs, take the right insights. It is, that synthesis is really quite remarkable. I mean, to your point on USDA, we love the USDA. We spend a lot of time with them. The reports are very difficult. I think I don't know if folks. I'm sure folks on the webinar have seen this, right? But the WASDE reports, these really important reports that come out with pricing and production yield and all that stuff. And it comes out in a 1970s looking, telex PDF that is a huge pain to have to go through, right? And that's something that, 2 years ago, you would have had to train certain machine learning models to read it and all that stuff. And now you can put it into, I mean, we ingest it obviously, and we put it as part of Horizon, but you can put it into any sort of different, of the kind of frontier models, and you're able to start really getting some cool analysis off it. It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah. And so the gap of interpreting the information is there's still pieces there, right?
Yeah.
And knowing, and this goes back to kind of the, a less experienced sourcing procurement person versus a tenured person, knowing, kind of trusting, teaching the two-way door, one-way door kind of conversation. Is this if I make a call on this, instilling the confidence in your team, but if I make a call on this, can I walk that decision backwards? And that's not a problem, right? That's something that I just lost my video here for some reason.
There you go. Now you're back.
That's not a problem. You want to build that confidence, and you're not going to get everything right the first time. It's the one-way direction where you can't walk it back, and that's really important for the managers of the organization and directors and leadership to kind of bring that confidence in your team that it's okay to make mistakes in this realm. And try to set those guardrails. And again, it's a Ben's situation, but letting them understand when they can push forward and make their own decisions, and when it might be a good idea to run this up the chain to get confirmation on, yes, this analysis looks right, and let's go forward, and then you build that confidence in your system.
Yeah, no, that level of empowerment, right? And how do you find the judgment for where you do the decision making? It's super important. A quick and folks on the line, keep asking the questions. This is great. We have one quick question, and then I wanted to dive into something you said. But one of the folks is asking, there were cases apparently where their sourcing specialists didn't know all of the places where their suppliers didn't know where they were getting where they were sourcing exactly, right? So they would go buying from, I don't know if it's a McCain as an example, right? They didn't always know where all the farms were located. Did that happen to you guys, or?
Oh, all the time. I will say I've enjoyed some of the, at Whole Foods, we enjoyed some of our history of working in a win-win-win relationship where suppliers at the legacy information at Whole Foods was you had to disclose where product was being sourced from. Yeah. In other organizations that I worked in, that information wasn't asked. And then when you did start to ask for that information, it took time. And Whole Foods does carry a little bit of prestige in a vendor saying, I've got my product in Whole Foods, and it opens up doors at other retailers when you can say, well, we're in Whole Foods, right or wrong. So vendors oftentimes were more willing to give up information that they might not have given up with another client. But I would just say it's about persistence and explaining the why you're looking for that information.
Yeah.
Again, bad news is best delivered quickly, as fast as you can, right? And oftentimes suppliers don't want to deliver bad news because they feel like, well, we're going to get this fixed before they find out. And that's where like a Helios and trying to track where the product is growing from or coming from, those raws are coming from, and you can go, hey, what's going on here? And often you're working with a large organization where the sales team really isn't connected with the sourcing team as tightly as you might like, and they're unaware of the problem. And then you can carry that, they can then carry that back to their team internally and start asking. And the important thing about that is that, I'm thinking about Southeast Asia or cocoa or some, areas that are prone to weather problems. If you can get in front of those weather issues early, you can come up with an alternative plan or make changes to a promotional plan that's happening 7 months from now, and you're supposed to be selling, chocolate at $1 a bar, and that's not, that now all of a sudden you've alienated your customers because you're going to be out of supply, you're priced wrong on shelf, and now you've lost trust at the retail shelf. And that's the absolute thing you never want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, exactly to your point, right? Being able to find out about these disruptions as early as possible. It's just, we have some customers who said, if you can't tell us at least 6 months before the disruption is supposed to occur, we're too big to make a change. Right. And they'll just, they'll just have to eat it. Which is, there's obviously some of our customers are more nimble, but it really puts that pressure on. Let's give as much leeway and lead time as possible for folks to be able to have that optionality and find additional sourcing places everywhere. To your point, when you look through, right, formula-based pricing, cost component analysis, take us through, how that works and where you see AI changing that from kind of the way it was done traditionally.
Well, it really centers in on that silo information. If a tenured sourcing person will have their own stuff on their internally, they'll know it. they'll have their own way of systemizing, sourcing and recording and saving that information. Often it's on their own desktop instead of a shared drive. I mean, it just happens, right? And where AI starts to take that information and then puts it into a nice searchable product. You can, I think back about corrugated prices and packaging and things like that, what really wasn't my initial expertise, but packaging costs are so much of the final delivered price. Or transportation, you've got diesel at over $5 a gallon now, so there's going to be surcharges and there's going to be cost increases, whether they've come today or they're coming tomorrow or coming next month. They're coming. And so now you've got an opportunity to take these individual component costs that are common to many different goods that you're selling or sourcing across, 10 or 20 different sourcing desks. And now you've got this dynamic database that is showing, okay, supplier A's cost for one, widget is X. That same widget or some very similar component is something different. Now, when you get into a conversation with your suppliers, you can have honest conversations and knowledgeable conversations. Hey, your widget costs over here on this one item is really a little higher than what we're seeing across the rest of our network. Prior to AI, it would take a huge amount of budgeting, resource time on everyone from the IT department all the way across your sourcing and procurement team to kind of collate that information together. And AI does it in manner of seconds.
Yeah. We had we had a customer who would sell a lot of caramelized onions to the big kind of burger chains and all that. And I remember that one of their main suppliers was Spain based, and they said, "Oh, we have to charge you 30% more because electricity costs have gone up so much." And to your point, right, with AI, we're able to say, well, they went up for a couple of weeks and they went right back down. And so, it was giving them that information, the negotiation that said, well, listen, we're not paying 30% more for the next 3 to 6 months, right?
And oh, by the way, your electricity cost was only 10% of your total cost of the formula, and that's where that benchmarking and that formula-based pricing starts to come together. Building a home or building a skyscraper is getting that blueprint of the cost model in place at the very beginning. That's critical. So, when you're going out to an RFP, you can structure your RFP in a manner that says, what are these component costs? That's the easiest thing. The hardest thing is when you're, working with a legacy supplier and you just said, hey, what's the price of this candle? And they give you one price, and they actually even give you a delivered cost. You don't even know what the FOB cost was. And by the way, it's coming from Vietnam, and now you've got to figure out, okay, what was the tariff and the transportation, and now you can't go this way, you got to go that way. So those conversations do take longer, but like creating a good building plan, spend your time in that realm, and that's where you might find headway or pushback from tenured employees, where they're like, I don't have the time, I don't have this, and that's where you as a leader, you have to sit down with them and say, well, can I help you here? What try to remove those roadblocks for that person so that they don't just put up their hands and say, I'm not using AI at all, I'm not doing this, it's too much work.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? One of the conversations we hear every now and then is, well, listen, I used ChatGPT 12 months ago and it hallucinated, and I'm never going to use it for work. And we say, listen, things have changed so dramatically, even in the last 3 months, forget the last 12 months, that it's worth always revisiting what are the more recent tools, right? Helios included, right? But a bunch of other tools that exist that can make your job easier, right? That can save you 50% of the time, 70% of the time, can help you do that analysis. We have a
Right.
question come through similar. It says, how can managers implement AI across teams or entire companies without diluting the organization's culture, personality, or other subtle but important intangibles? And then also, what should leaders, managers consider when adopting AI to ensure the business retains its unique identity and cultural strengths? Good question.
Yeah, a lot there. Oh, it's really easy. You just take a big
No
stick
problem.
and no, it goes to hopefully starting with a core group of people that are trusted and respected within the organization and getting them on board. It goes with at one company, as they were implementing SAP, they had a committee, and the committee was the committee of no. So as you're implementing things, you got to stay focused, and you can't overreach and take other things. And that's what the committee of no was. No, we're not going to go do this. No, we're not doing this phase. No, and so where, at the at the ground-based level, I think one of the easiest things to do is making sure that time is blocked out on everyone's calendar for them to embrace and try it and experiment with the AI products and services, understanding that this is a game changer. And if you're not kind of keeping up with the processes, it will get easier, both because the technology is going to make it easier to use. I think back, 18, 12 months ago, when you had to be so specific about the question you were asking to get the right data back. And that's still the case, that when you're in a negotiation with a supplier, you have to ask the right questions to get the right information back. And that's where that tension often happens with suppliers, is initially you don't ask the right question, and then that gets you an answer that you're not really wanting to hear, not because it's the wrong response. It's not, you don't want to hear it. And so then you rephrase your question, and that's the same process with AI, but it's happening so much faster. It's on, X 200% X, and so where you can create space within your organization for that learning, that's going to help take the stress out of the system of trying to introduce something new. And then you also have to make sure that you've instilled with your team that if they get poked or prodded by other cross-functional teams and they're asking for more, bring that information forward so that you can make kind but gentle conversations of, no, I don't have the time to do this. I'm learning this new training or new process. And it's not a one and done thing. It's not a one-day seminar. It might be a one-day event, in a training in your organization, but then it's imperative that you block out an hour or half hour a day, for 3 or 4 weeks to really start to get to use the product and embrace it.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that as well is things are changing so fast in a positive way that try as much as you can in your organizations, push down the ability for your employees to test new tools easily, right? I think that understandably, the way it used to work in IT, right? If IT was the center of what new tools you could onboard or not, you'd have to go through these like 6 and 12-month procurement. Go ahead and reach out to these new companies, ask for POC. I think certainly we know as Helios, we're more than willing to do it. I think a lot of other new AI companies are happy to do it as well, especially for some of the larger companies, and just start testing the tools.
Right.
And I think what that'll allow you to do is you can figure out, well, how does AI actually work in my day-to-day? How does AI work in my organization? And the culture is so unique, right, at every company, that you want to figure out how AI can work for you rather than the way it was traditionally done in SaaS, right? Where, well, you had a SaaS dashboard, and that's the dashboard. And if you don't like it, well, you can give us some feedback, and maybe we'll add new features in 6 or 12 months. That's over, right?
Yeah.
Everybody gets to have personalized intelligence, hyper customization at scale. It's magical, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
be stuck in this. God, I hate this dashboard, and but it's the only dashboard that's available to us. And if we wanted to go to another dashboard, it's going to take us 12 months of an RFP. That's done, right? And I think part of it is you should ask more, not just of your vendors, but ask more of your, whoever your gatekeeper is, if it is IT, to allow you to start using some of these tools far more rapidly and testing them at scale. Because there's no reason for, especially in procurement, right, where the place where we work and live and love, there's no reason why you should be stuck on a dashboard that doesn't work for you, or worse, right, getting these kind of generic reports that you get once a month that don't it's too late, it's not giving you any information that you need for your role. I think just the last point of this, because it's something we're really passionate about, Ishan, is one of the things that's really unique, I think, about procurement, especially around agricultural commodities, is it doesn't always have to look like AI for it to be AI. And so I think the most popular product we have, and it's a new product this year, is what we call kind of our personalized intelligence. And they're just custom reports that each one of our users gets about the commodities, the countries, the risks they care about. You get it every week, you get it every month. And it's unique to everybody, and it's all AI generated and leverages all our proprietary intelligence and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the way you as a user receive it is just an email with a report about the things you care about. But
Yeah.
it's not, it's so interesting, because you talk to a bunch of VCs and they'll say, oh, you've got to build this MCP server, and you connect it to Claude, and then your users are going to want to talk to Claude and then talk to Helios through Claude. Some users want that, and we're happy to do that. But the majority of our users say, hey, the way we work is with reports in our inbox. And so you're able to meet the customer where they are, even if it doesn't look like AI when you're receiving your report. It's all AI, right? It's cutting edge, and I think that's a big balance to look at as we continue to innovate. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and I was good having come out of an environment where security was utmost, at top of mind on every piece of information. Where these AI databases are sitting, they're sitting with AWS, they're sitting with Google, they're sitting with these very well trusted organizations that have immense security built around the data.
Yeah.
And how it's accessed. And again, with technology, there's going to be moments when data is breached, but with AI, there's ways to build your secure information, bring it across into your garden wall or wherever, and then pull that public or data out of the cloud and maintain that security at your at whatever level you feel you need it at.
Yeah.
And I guess it should be a question everyone asks, but it's a question that can be easily answered. When we started using Helios last year at Amazon, we had protocols to go through, but we were able to get approval with it. And I don't know, I'm not sitting in other companies that have security levels that are what I felt were very, very tight. But you can get.
We were happy to go through the process with you.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then here I'm a guy that likes to try to find information on price and cost, and I have no idea about the technology and some of the jargon. And the two companies were able to put the right people to talk to one another, and I just kind of sat back and asked different questions about what a bibbit is or a bobbit or whatever it was, and okay, now I understand what that function is, but am I ever going to need to use it again? No, but they understood it and they got it connected. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is you shouldn't be afraid of, well, I've got this confidential information. I can't use AI. I can't use a third party. That is the dark ages.
Yeah, I totally agree. Team, please send in your questions. Mario has sent his apologies. He had a work emergency. He just sent us an email. So we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Let us know if there's some questions. I had one last question, Paul. One of the things that has been really interesting for us, we work with a very large yogurt maker, and I remember when we first started talking to them, they said, oh, a few years ago they started sourcing blueberries from Poland, I believe, or raspberries from Poland, and they said, well, the moment I did that, I hired a Polish national who could fly back and forth from London, where this company was based, to Poland to go check the fields and check the suppliers in person. And we were just astounded. We said, oh my God, you hired a full-time employee just to be able to cover kind of that new crop, that new commodity, that new region. How do you get, a sourcing specialist like that who's been doing it for so long? How do you get these procurement teams comfortable, right, to trust AI or an AI recommendation or insight over their own gut in a place where, feeling and seeing the land and the suppliers is such a big part of the business?
It's definitely a process. It goes to the overall building of the relationship, but knowledge gets you to that, trust but verify. But knowledge gets you to that spot so much faster. If your sourcing or procurement team has knowledge about how the process is going, and that's where AI and information really speeds the process up. If that person is asking the proper questions, then of the suppliers, then the supplier starts to treat them at a different level of they're not dumbing down the conversation. They're speaking more on their own terms. They're speaking openly. I can't tell you how many times it's happened. Often with organic suppliers, everything's very special. We do it a certain way, and it is, but it isn't when you get to a larger scale. There's industry practices, whether it's conventional, organic, or whatever. And so as the buyers become more knowledgeable, and that's where AI drives that ability to build that trust, then that sourcing person starts to understand that they have a more meaningful conversation through the use of AI with their suppliers. And it starts to break down their internal gut information, not in a bad way, but in a good way. They can start to say, I knew this, and AI is giving me the same information. And now oftentimes they get moved. 1 week they're buying chia seeds, and the next week they're buying whey protein for ready to drink protein drinks, right? So they're moving from operation, and so they need a path that will allow them to quickly get up to speed in their new role. Typically those new roles are promotions, right? And you don't want to fail as you're getting promoted. Your team should trust you that there's going to be moments when you have to pause and move sideways before stepping forward again. But AI takes that learning curve and really shortens it up. And so the faster you can trust the data and the information, the better it is going to be for your career.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Mario, thank you so much for being able to join. I know there were some issues, but it's
thank you very much.
I
really apologize about the time, but yeah,
it's totally fine. I know we don't have as much time, so we might do a little bit of rapid fire with you, if that's okay. And folks, feel free to drop some questions, and we'll make sure Mario gets some time to answer them. So Mario, welcome. We've been talking, as you can expect, a lot about AI on the webinar, but you're right at the center, for better or worse, right, of running
Yeah.
that digital transformation using artificial intelligence at Grupo Bimbo. When your leadership is asking you for AI, like, what does that actually look like? What are they asking? How do you respond to it? All that.
Yeah, and honestly, and thank you very much for all the people to having me. Yes, maybe I feel when the CPO, the CIO ask for to have AI here in the organization, I little feel like the meme that, yeah, who we are, hey, we are CEOs. What we need, AI, for what? We don't know. Yes, and I totally agree with Paul. We have a base about all the implementation for artificial intelligence is the data. And you can imagine that working in a huge organization like Grupo Bimbo, 40 countries, 4 continents, we have different maturity about the data that we have in procurement. Especially, we want to start with the basis. The basis are we want to have AI, and we are working on that to have AI for spend analytics and spend visibility, in order to have visibility about the spend that we have in different organizations and among different business units. And you can imagine we have different maturity among all the business units that we have in Grupo Bimbo. Different the maturity that we have Mexico, North America, Latam, EMEA, India, East Asia is totally different. That means that the maturity of the data is different.
Yeah.
So we need to deal that in order to have a successful implementation of any AI, generative AI, agentic AI, agents AI, in order to have a successful implementation of the of that kind of technology. The baseline is the data. You can imagine about that.
And so take us through kind of a recent, whether it's a pilot or a project where you have seen that be successful, right? Like, what was the difference there?
The difference there is, and probably it's most of the challenges that most of the people in the audience are facing. You can imagine that we have different ERPs, different labels of the ERPs. So we have ERP A, B, C in different business units, and sometimes we have more than one ERP in the same business unit. So it's a challenge. Yeah. Why? I don't know, but it's the definition that we have from our CIO. So in that case, we need to extract the information, and not only extraction. The extraction is the easy part. We need to homologate that information. Okay, to homologate that information, and also to be careful about the quality of the data, because you can imagine, especially that business units where we have more than one ERP in the same business unit, the quality of the data, we have duplicated data, duplicated suppliers, duplicated spend, in order to have the visibility of the spend. Okay, when we show the initial dashboards about the spend to the procurement teams, maybe we are showing $40 million in direct spend, and they say, no, we have only 20. Yes, analyzing the data, we have duplicated. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to have. The recommendation that I have is, first of all, work very close with the business unit, especially with procurement, in order to have a validation of the data before having that data to feeding any AI systems. Before that, work very close with your procurement team in order to clean all the data. It's a huge investment of time, yes. It's a huge effort, yes. But trust me, it's the way that we have to do in order to have a successful AI implementation.
Yeah, and guys, I know we're at time. We'll just go a few minutes over if the audience permits, and if Mario and Paul, you guys are okay with it. What do you think is a case or use case, right, or an application of AI in procurement that's really overhyped? We can, yeah, you go, Mario, and then Paul, and then we can give you a little color on what we're hearing as well.
Paul, if you want to address this.
I don't know if it's so much overhyped, but I guess it would be the learning curve part of it. It's going to be, here's this new product and you're going to try it and it's going to be good. And I think it's really the time that the individual has to spend to learn how to use it like any other tool. I think, I'm going to date myself, Excel. There's folks that are amazingly great at it, and then there's folks like me that aren't. And what AI starts to do is it starts to help kind of level that playing field in a lot of different respects, not just in using data and Excel, but just taking the time to understand what AI is at this point in time. It will be different 3 months from now, and 6 months from now for sure. But as you can kind of learn to use the product and grow with it, it's like being a new parent versus the grandparent that shows up. The new parents understand that they for whatever reason they can survive on 2.5 hours of sleep, and then because they get used to it, right, it becomes part of their habit. And I think what AI, what Mario was saying was, from the C-suite, well, just do it, and it should be easy. And that's the part we all have to realize. There's a learning curve, and you have to spend the time at the beginning to make sure that everyone understands that it is a learning curve, and we understand that it's going to take time, but that learning curve is going to speed up rapidly, and the longer you wait, it's going to take you. You're going to be the last guy in the race, and you don't want to. I don't think you need to be the first guy, but you got to be in the middle of the pack, and that's where you got to spend and commit to the time at the beginning. So the overhyped part is, oh, this is going to solve everything. It's not. Maybe in 10 years or 5 years, it does something magical, right? Solves, dependence on something, cures cancer, right? But today it's still early on,
Yeah. Mario?
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul. Maybe the overhype that maybe we create the overhype, especially in procurement, because yes, I remember 3 or 4 years ago when AI started approaching to the final users, to the companies. Yes, we imagined to have AI for spend visibility. I remember one executive on Grupo Bimbo say, "Okay, this looks fantastic. Let's implement for all categories, for all business units." And no, let's start small. Why we we don't start with a small business unit with any specific category in order to extract the data, to test the different scenarios, and to provide the data. And in a cycle, we are going to polish that AI. Once we have polished and we are sure that we are delivering value with that little piece of AI, yes, let's start deploying to the rest of the business units. Maybe, Francisco, I think I'm AI enthusiastic, but sometimes I think the overhype, we create the overhypes in all the organizations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? And I think we all just get so excited about the technology and what's possible. I think sometimes we might overpromise. Yeah. Right? Makes sense. Team, just the last takeaway, we'd love to hear from each of you. What is one piece of advice that you would have for procurement leaders who are going through this transformation, right? Maybe Mario, you start, and then Paul.
Okay, sure, absolutely. My one piece takeaway for this is, yes, we have the technology, we have the data, we have all the all the pieces in order to have a very good implementation of AI. But in my experience, my recommendation is to have a governance model, because we, as a human, we are going to operate AI. AI is not substituting the human. AI is have a lot of potential for the human capabilities. Okay, so My recommendation is to have the human in the loop for any AI implementation, and to have a strong governance model for the data, for the business units, working very close with the IT department and working very close with all the different teams in procurement, but in a governance data. Trust me, the implementation of AI will modify your organizational structure in procurement. So be prepared of that and work in a very, very good governance model. That's my final recommendation.
Super interesting. Paul?
I'm going to take it from kind of the bottom, or the doer up perspective of the guy sitting at the desk, and I think it's about building the trust and confidence in the data, and that goes back to Mario's point from the top down of making sure that your governance and stuff is there, so you've got confidence in the greater information and the policies, and you're not going to overstep yourself. But once you get into using the information, and I'm kind of coming from more of a legacy tenured person in the role, you really have to, the more confidence that you get with using the product and the information, that's going to give you your advantage or your special secret sauce of your own personal value within the organization, so that when you're speaking to your suppliers or you're going upstream to your leadership, number one, the leadership is going to expect you to turn things around so much faster. Suppliers are going to sourcing folks are going to expect suppliers to turn information around so much faster. So you've got to get in the early stages here, you've got to get confident in the information that you're using so that you can hit these timelines that are going to be expected of you. And that's kind of, I think, like an unknown, unintended consequences is that time is going to get compressed. In the beginning, it's saving you time and helping you complete your job, but the expectations of everyone else around you is also going to all of a sudden compress that time. So I feel like it's that confidence in asking that you've asked the system the right set of questions, confidence in the data that the system, back to what Mario was saying about scrubbing and making sure that data is clean and starting in a small spot and growing from there. You can't boil the ocean in one day. So start small, get that confidence, and then move forward.
That's awesome. Mario, Paul, thank you so much for the time. To everybody who joined, thank you so much for the questions. It's been a wonderful session. We really appreciate it. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.